I refuse to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their guilt rings. Right, the bouncers' guilt rings.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day.
This is COLM McGuigan for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. Delighted to be joined by Stephen Espinoza here in the MGM Grand. Massive fight week like this. How big is this fight really on a global scale?
It's bigger than we thought, and that's saying a lot because we were extremely excited about it, but I think we underestimated it a little bit. And part of that is natural because in order for a fight to be really big on a sort of cultural level, it's got to spread from just the boxing fan to the sports fan to the general consumer. And you never know when it's going to happen. It takes a little bit of luck, a lot of hard work. And here, sitting here on Wednesday of fight week, that's definitely happened. And I think when we look at any metric, whether it's pay-per-view pre-buys, whether it's the gate, whether it's social media activity, all of it is exceeding what we expected by a significant amount. I mean, it really feels like the biggest thing that's been in Vegas since the Mayweather days.
I actually said that to Leonard Ellerby. It's got that feel about it. In terms of the pay-per-view numbers for this fight, what would your prediction be at this stage? Give me a roundabout prediction, something that you think it might hit.
Look, I hate doing that because I'm a little superstitious. I don't want to jinx it. But look, pretty much the biggest thing that we've seen since Mayweather-McGregor was the 800,000 that Canelo Plant did. And Wilder Fury was a little bit below that, but basically that's been the high water mark. So, and I think there's plenty of reasons for that. I think the biggest has been piracy. I mean, there's no question that is definitely depressing the amount of sales. So, look, if we were anywhere in that ballpark, I'd be absolutely thrilled. If we exceeded that, then I'd be shocked. But if we were still at even at 400,000 or 500,000 buys domestically, that's still bigger than just about anything other than the top 4 or 5 fights we've seen in the last 5 years. And given where these guys are in their careers, I'd be perfectly satisfied if we ended up sort of in that mid-range. I'm pulling for more, but look, I think there's no way that these guys don't walk away with career high paydays by a factor of 2 or 3.
In terms of working with other broadcasters, obviously DAZN in the UK, and this not being a pay-per-view in the UK is massive. How is that relationship now, and is that something that we might see going forward?
The relationship is good. We're cordial, and I think things have been working relatively well. I talked to the DAZN team and spoke to them a couple hours ago today. We have regular calls. It's a bit of a new experience. It's a little bit strange getting on a call with competitors, but we've been down that road before. We've done it, 20 years ago with Lewis versus Tyson and Mayweather-Pacquiao, Mayweather-McGregor. So, look, I think it's always good when, people put their business objectives and their rivalries aside, and get something done, because clearly not just the fighters are benefiting, but the sport overall.
There's been rumours that Spence Crawford will be announced on Saturday. I see that little grin, the smirk. It tells me it is going to be announced on Saturday night, if I'm honest. Can you give us any comment on that?
I'd love to say yes. There's no one who'd be more excited about it than me. And I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I'm saying at this point there's no plans for it. Now, that can change. If we have a breakthrough and close the last few things and get signatures and people want to jump on a plane, sure.
So you're telling me categorically at this present time neither Spence or Crawford will be in town? Or, well, certainly not both.
Well, Errol I know is coming to the fight.
Now the plot thickens.
Yeah, Errol's coming, and he's coming, regardless, because Errol's a fight fan and he enjoys the atmosphere. But that's independent of that. Now, I haven't heard about Crawford. So I think, look, if you see Errol wandering around the MGM, on Thursday or Friday, I wouldn't put two and two together. Likely he's there like a lot of fighters. I mean, we've got such a contingent of fighters. I mean, everybody's coming out. That's when you really have a big advantage, when all the other fighters coming out. The Charlos, David Benavidez, Wilder, Ruiz. Basically anybody who's fought on Showtime in the last year will be here. So there's a lot of fights that could be made if we all got them together in one room, and maybe that's a good idea.
Benavidez Plant, this, and potentially Spence Crawford. That's a massive few months. Talk to me about maybe your rivals and some comments, because it's not often we get to speak to you guys being in the UK, but we will speak to Eddie Hearn, and he'll have his comments on the situation and say that Matchroom and DAZN are producing the best fights. They're active in all markets all over the world. Do you have any comments on those type of comments that you've heard from Eddie and your business thus far?
Sure. I mean, look, we all know what Eddie is and does. Like, everything he does is the greatest thing and the greatest invention of all time, and everything everyone else does is terrible. So, he does it with his own charm, so you take it all with a grain of salt. The reality is, we've already had the two massive fights, and if we've got, the third one in Spence Crawford, going on that run of fights, as you rightly point out, is as good as run as we've seen in recent memory. Put aside, Matchroom or DAZN or Top Rank or anybody else. It's as good as a run of we've seen in a few months, and that's not putting away some really interesting fights in the meantime, like the big upset we had a couple weeks ago with Fundora, and some fantastic fights we've had earlier in the year as well. So the reality is, I think what we've experienced here is, once we get to this level, once we get the ball rolling, and fighters are taking tough fights, it snowballs. So, and this has been something going on since last year. You don't get undisputed titleists like Jermell Charlo without taking tough fights. You don't get unified titleists like Errol Spence without taking tough fights. So the reality in terms of the global market, we're very confident there's nobody putting on bigger fights on a more consistent basis on a from pay-per-view to non-pay-per-view, from developmental, than what we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Do you believe Matchroom are on the same scale or close to what you're doing at the moment on their recent run of fights, or maybe over the last 12 months? How do you rate their business?
I think it's a different business. I think the reality is, like much of their business, it's been interesting to see the transition from truly trying to be a global business, from coming in announcing I've got $1 billion and I'm going to run everybody out of the industry, and by the way, your business model sucks, to all of a sudden admitting, hey, maybe I was wrong and I don't have $1 billion, and now I'm going to run out to the Middle East to do most of my events. So it's been an interesting, observing it from a third party. But the reality is, look, they've got great talent. We obviously work with AJ. He's a fantastic fighter. There's plenty of fights to be made there. I'd see him struggling with having lost some of his fighters to other platforms. It happens. That's part of the business. But look, I think we've reached some equilibrium. The reality is nobody's coming in with a big checkbook to run everybody out of the business. The fact is, pay-per-view exists for a reason. You want to come in and say pay-per-view is dead in the U.S. and do regular pay-per-views in the U.K., that's fine. But people have to realize, people are paying attention. So when you say pay-per-view is dead and you rely on pay-per-view regularly, and all of a sudden pay-per-view is not so dead, and all of a sudden you've got to go to the UK and then not even the UK, but the Middle East to fund most of your fights, it's an interesting transition. But look, they'll figure it out. Matchroom is a good, solid business. They've got intelligent guys over there, and there's more than enough room for several successful entities within the sport of boxing.
Last one from me, because I know you're a busy man. If we don't get Spence Crawford, and your little grin at the time tells me that we are getting it, and you're remaining very coy, so you can think about me when you announce it in the ring on Saturday night and say I did tell you so. But in terms of if we don't get it over the next couple of months, is that fight dead in the water and it'll never happen then?
I hate to say it, but probably so. Probably so, because if we're not able to close this deal in the next couple of months, I think that's...
You nearly said days there.
Yeah. In the next couple of months, because I don't want to close the door. I really don't. But if we're not able to close in the next couple of months, that would be meaning that there have been active, meaningful discussions going on for, basically a year straight. And if we haven't been able to reach an agreement by that point, then probably the odds are that it's never going to happen.
Thank you very much for your time, Stephen. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on IFL TV.
Good to see you.
Because I refuse to not be first.
Do we do enough? Well, I never shut up about it.
It must have been about 16, 17. We nicked their gilt rings. Right, the bouncer's gilt ring.
This is no good for me. That's the reality. If you want the honest truth, and I see it every day,